In this video, we're going to cover building custom report entry types for your reports. In previous video, we covered the very basics of activating a built-in report type for location report type, adding entries to that report type, and walking through the process of completing it. And in a separate video, we went through activating and configuring some more of the therms built-in report types. If you haven't seen those videos or you need a refresher, you can go to the Therms website under the support section and search for report tutorials. So what we're going to start out here is creating a basic report for a location report. And I have my options here for add entry and incident. Let's talk about these first. An entry is a classification of just a basic report entry. So I have some options here: general, foot patrol, interview, and the rest of these. If you haven't had a chance to look at these report entry types, you can go ahead and you can add them in the configuration to your location report and play around with them. And then we have the option for incident. Now, incident is also a report entry type, but they're a different classification. And we have an arrest and retail theft. These are also both built-in report entry types. So if I had an arrest incident and I wanted to complete a report entry in my report for that, I can do that with this report entry type. I'll close this out. And let's say for this demonstration, we're working as a security officer at Acme Business Complex, and we want to write parking violations for the parking lot in the business complex. Well, we don't really have an option for a parking violation report entry type in here. We could use a general report entry type, and the security officers can add information about the vehicle and the parking violation and attach photos and save that under general. But a more useful method would be a parking violation report entry specific for writing citations or documenting the vehicles that are parked wrong. So let's go into our configuration for the reports module. And we have a list of report types. If we go down to the location report type and we scroll to the very bottom, we see what report entry types are actually available for this report type. If I drop this down, there's only a list of 2 more report entry types that we can add here: camera activity or task. Now, these don't necessarily relate to the location report type. Camera activity is a built-in that was built specifically for the camera monitoring report type. You can add it here, but you really wouldn't want to use that in a report entry for a location report. So notice that we don't have a parking violation. Let's go back to our configuration menu and let's go to report entries. Here's a list of the built-in therms report entry types. What we want to do is create a parking violation, a custom report entry type for parking violations. So I'll click new entry. So what we see here is a form for building a custom report entry type. The first thing we have is a form name. So we want to title this parking violation. We can give it an internal comment, which is just a note for us. So when we're looking at it in the list of entry types, we have some information. We'll skip over this for now. We can add some help text for our security officers or users that are completing the reports. We'll also skip this for now. We need to assign it an icon. So I'll search for parking, and I see a P that matches a parking violation nicely. Now we have classification. When we were looking at our location report, we had 2 options. We had add entry and incident. When we clicked add entry, we could see things like general, foot patrol, or vehicle patrol. And when we clicked on the incident type, we had an arrest incident and we had a retail theft incident. So those are classifications. When I drop this down, I see I have general entry, incident, static form, and violation. We won't cover static form for now, but in a previous video we went over how to create report entry types for that don't take more than 1 report entry and only accept 1 static form. So for this parking violation, it's not a general entry, it's not an incident. I want to classify it as a violation. So I'll go ahead and select violation. The set time field isn't important now. We'll come back to that in a moment. Now at the bottom here, I see the option for build form and preview display. Now, I'm going to go to the build form and I'm going to select Add Field. This is going to give me a list of options for the fields that I can add to my form. I have activity types, checkbox, date and time, files to upload, radio button options, a drop-down select, text, and text area. Well, the first thing that I want to add in a parking violation is a date and time. Most report entries are going to have a date and time. So let's select that. Now if I scroll down and I'm looking at my build form, I see that I have example date and time. And over here to the right, I have date and time options. Now the form label is the first field here. I actually want to change this and we will just call it date. And I can add some help text. We'll also skip over that. If I wanted to change this and I only want it to be time, I have a drop down option here to be date or time only. So you can toggle that. I'm going to leave it for date and time just in case I have a security officer or user that's creating this report entry and they need to set the date. I have this option for required, meaning this report entry type can't be created without a date actually being filled in. And I think that's a required field, so I'm going to make sure that's required. Static date and time is another option. I'll briefly cover this. When I select static date and time, it'll make this field uneditable to any users. So right now, I can click the calendar icon and I can drop it down and I can change the time. If I select the static date and time option, now this date field is not editable anymore to any users. So that might be useful to you if you require your security officers to create a report entry at the moment that they have an incident. This date and time field will be set right when they click the Add Entry button and it cannot be edited at any later time. If you don't want that to be a static date field, for example, sometimes a security officer may be busy on site and they come across a violation or an incident and they have to handle it, or they're delayed for 20, 30 minutes or an hour. They want to come back and they want to document the time. It may be necessary for them to edit this date and time field. So let's keep looking at these options here. We have display, internal display only, and label. So this bottom half is these are options for how the report entry is actually going to be displayed when the report's completed or when it goes to our customer or it's downloaded as a PDF and sent to a customer. That's what this will look like. So I'm just going to give this the same title as date. And I'll give you an example of what that looks like. So here we see date on the form. If I type in date and time, we notice that it changes. But this on the display label is still set to date. If I go to preview display, this is going to show me what it'll look like when the report entry is completed. So I can actually change this right here also, date and time. And it'll update as we type it. So that's what the display labels are for. I'll go back to build form and let's add some more entries for our parking violation. Now the next thing that we want to know about in a parking violation is probably the make and model of the vehicle. So I'm going to need a text box. I have the option for example text input, and I will change this label in the form to vehicle, make, and model. I'm going to skip the help text. I'm going to make this a required field, meaning that they can't save this report entry without adding the vehicle, make, and model. And then the display label is going to be make and model. I'm going to call this Honda Accord. Let's add another field. And we'll give it a text area because we want to know what the reason for the parking violation is. Now the example text paragraph label, we will change to reason for violation. And we'll make this a required field also. And the label on the display will be reason. Now let's give it a reason in our form here. We'll say parked over yellow line. Now let's take a look at how this is looking in our display. And that's it. So we have a date and time field, make and model, and a reason. Let's add one more option here to our parking violation. Let's go to add field and let's add a checkbox. So a checkbox can be checked or unchecked. And what we'll do is we will make sure that we're editing the checkbox, and we will pose this as a question to our security officers that are completing this report entry type. So we'll say, was a parking violation left on the vehicle? And then I go down here to the bottom. I'm not going to make this required, because if I make it required, then it means that they always have to check this box. And that wouldn't necessarily make sense if they're answering a question. So I won't make this a required field. Oh, and it looks like we have a glitch there. So if we look at the display options here, we have checked label. So when this box is checked, this label will show up. And we want, when the security officer is answering this question, was a parking violation left on the vehicle, and they check it, we want that to say a parking violation was left on the vehicle. So now it's a statement. If it's unchecked, this is optional, we can say no parking violation left on vehicle. Or we can just leave this empty if it's unchecked. But we're going to add this text now. So let's leave it checked. Let's go over to our preview display. So now we see here at the bottom, a parking violation was left on the vehicle, because that box is checked. If I wanted to clear this out and we just didn't want to display anything when that was unchecked, let's see what that looks like. So I'll clear this field out. I'll go back to my build form. I'll go to the bottom. I'll uncheck this, and then I'll go back to preview display. So it gives me this grayed out text, checkbox, no demo value or label. And that's because we left this as empty. Okay, so now we have a pretty basic form set up for a parking violation. Let's look at this, and let's say that we wanted to rearrange this a little bit. We wanted to put the checkbox above the reason for violation. So all we have to do in the form builder is hover over it and drag it, and we can move it to the position that we want. We can do the same thing in the preview display. So if I hover over any of these boxes, I have some options here. So we have full width or field width, which is 1/3, 1/2, or 2/3. So I'm going to select the half, and what that allows me to do is move this make and model of the Honda Accord up here to the top field. So now I need to make this field actually half width also. And then what's going to happen is they're going to show up side by side next to each other. So I can actually move this back just to demonstrate what we just did. Move it back to its own container here, and then make it full width. So if you wanted to put two of them on the same row, you could do that. So let's go, and we'll make this 1/3, and we'll make this 2/3, and then we'll put this up here with the make and model. And then we have reason for the violation, and if the checkbox for a parking citation was given, we want that to show up here. Right now it's just showing no demo value because we have removed this box here, removed the text from this option. So that's looking pretty good. Let's check our form one more time and look it over. Oh, okay, so we have one thing that's really important here. The set time field is a checkbox, and we actually don't have set time field checked right now. And that's because when we first started this form, we didn't have any fields yet. But now that we have a date and time field, in our report, we want report entries to show in chronological order, ascending or descending. And the report entry, because this is custom, it needs to know which date and time field is the time field for the report entry. So I'm going to select this, and I'm only given one option because we only have one date and time field here. So I'll select date and time field, and there is no end time. Now, that would be used in a case where if I was building a custom report entry, for example, a vehicle patrol, where there's a start time and an end time field. It spanned across 2 times, and there was 2 date and time fields here. For example, arrived on property, and then another date and time field that was left on property. Then, in that case, I might want to set an end time field. But that's optional, and we're going to skip that for now. So let's save our report entry type. Now, if we go down here to parking violation, we have our custom report entry type built. Now, if we go back to reports, and I create a new location report, select Acme Business Complex, create report. Now I have add entry. I don't see my parking violation report entry type in here. Let's look in the incident type. I don't see it in here either. What happened? Well, when we create a report entry type, it doesn't automatically get added to reports. Now, this is a location report type. So what I need to do is go back to my configuration screen, and I need to go down to the location report type. I'll select it, scroll to the very bottom of the page, and we have a list of report entry types. Now, this is the list of report entry types that are allowed to be added to a report. I actually need to select the parking violation report entry type in this box, so that way it can be added to the location reports. So if I select it, now I see it in the list here, and parking violation is there. I'm going to save the location report type. I go back to my reports, and I have this in progress report. Now I have a third option. Because the classification for a parking violation is violation, we see a third button. And that's our parking violation. I can enter a time. Was a parking violation left on the vehicle? Yes. And I can say Honda Accord. Reason for the violation: parked over yellow line. And now when I save it, this is the display that we were building in the form builder, next to the form builder, and how the display layout is. So that's pretty much it. What we just went through is creating a custom report entry type, and then adding that report entry type to the location report type, so that way it can be added into the reports. That's kind of the basics. You can go back to the configuration screen, and you can play around with the drag and drop builder, and you can add and move things around and rename them and label them as much as you want. If you have any questions or you're looking for more help, check out our website under the support section and search for report tutorials. Or if you're having trouble with something, you can always reach out to us at support@therms.io.